Okay, this review is very similar to the test as far as the concepts go. So if you can follow this, then you'll do very well on the test. So the first part is find the least common multiple. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to list out the multiples of 4. And then I'm going to list out the multiples of 5 and then 10 and see which one is the lowest they have in common. So 5 is 5, 10, and we use multiples to find common denominators for fractions, so it's important. And then 10 is 10, 20, 30, 40. But I can see right now that the lowest number that they all have in common is 20, so the answer is 20. The same thing for 6 and 8. So 6 is 6, 12, 18, 24, 30, 36. 8 is 8, 16, 24, 32, 40. So the two that I have in common are 24. That's the least common multiple. And then make sure you know your basic fractions to decimals. So 0.25 is 1/4. 6.6 repeating is a big 6, and then the 2/3, because 0.6 repeating is 2/3. And then this one I don't recognize, so I know that it's 23 hundredths because there are 2 decimal places after the decimal. So there's 2 zeros. And now I try to reduce it. There's nothing in common with 23 and 100. And then D is 5 is big, and then there's 1 decimal spot, 4/10. Okay, so on our quiz, people got marked wrong because they didn't reduce 4/10. So this is going to be 5 and 2/5 is your final answer. And then write each fraction as a decimal. 3/4 is 0.75. 2 and 1/3 is a big 2, and 1/3 is 0.3 repeating. So make sure you put the repeating bar. And then C is -3 is a large number, and then half is 0.5. Order these from least to greatest. I would put them first into decimals. So 1/3 is 0.3 repeating. -1/2 is -0.5. 0.4, 0.2, -0.3. So the negatives we know are going to go first. So which one is more negative on the number line? So -0.5 is over here, and -0.3 is closer to 0. So the least number is -0.5 or -1/2. That's done. The next negative is -0.3. That's done. Now I have to go in between 0.2, 0.4, and 0.3 repeating. So the 10 spot is, there's a 2 in the 10 spot. So 0.2 is the next one. And then 3 is less than 4, so I'm going to write 1/3 and then 0.4. So that's from least to greatest. Down here, compare the numbers. So put greater than, less than, or equal to. So on the number line, this was 0. -5/8 would be over here, and -3/8 would be right here. So -3/8 is greater than -5/8. And then 2/10, I'm going to write 1/4 as 0.25. So 0.25 is greater than 2/10. And then 1/3 and 2/5. Okay, well, there's 2 ways I can do it. I can compare them by getting a common denominator. Actually, I'll do that way. So the least common multiple of 3 and 5 is 15. So I'm going to multiply 5 by 15. I have to multiply it by 3. So this is going to be 6/15 because 2 times 3 is 6. To go from 3 to 15, I multiply by 5. So this is 5/15. So 6/15 is greater. And then now we're going to add, subtract, multiply, and divide fractions. So when you're adding, you need to get a common denominator. So my common denominator is going to be 15. 3 times 5 is 15, so I have to multiply 2 times 5. So this is 10. 5 times 3 is 15, so I'm going to multiply 1 times 3 to get 3. Now I add the numerator, keep the denominator the same, and then look to see if there's anything I can reduce. And there's not, so it's done. B, when you divide fractions, you flip the second one and multiply. Cancel out any factors. 7 on the top, 7 on the bottom, cancels out. It's 3/5. Now check your signs, and positive divided by positive is a positive, so it's right. Change improper fractions to change mixed numbers to improper fractions. Now I have to get a common denominator, which is going to be 28. So I write both of them as 28. To go from 4 to 28, you multiply by 7. So I have to multiply negative 13 by 7. 3 times 7 is 21. Carry the 2. 1 times 7 is 7 plus 2 is 91. So it's negative 91. Plus, now to go from 7 to 28, you multiply by 4. So 3 times 4 is 12. So negative 91 plus 12 is the same thing as doing 91 minus 12 and taking the opposite of it. So this is negative 79 over 28. And you can't reduce that anymore. That was a tough one. In letter D, this parentheses means that we're multiplying. So we're going to multiply straight across, but first, I like to cancel out common factors. It makes it easier. So there's no common factors with 5/7, but there are common factors with 14/7. I can change this to a 2 and this to a 1 because 14/7 is 2. So now I multiply across. 5 times 2 is 10 over 1 times 7 is 7. It's already reduced. And when you divide fractions, first change to a mixed number. So this is 22 over 5. Flip this one times 2 over 3. Check for common factors. 22 and 3 does not reduce. 2 and 5 does not reduce. Now I have to multiply across, so it's 44 over 15. And then letter F, it's 3/7 times, if you have a whole number, write it as a fraction, 5 over 1. I multiply across, I check common factors. There's nothing I can do with 3 divided by 1. There's nothing I can do with 5 divided by 7. So the answer is 15/7. Okay, now dividing. So I'm going to write this number as a fraction, negative 3 over 1. And I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal, which is negative 7 over 9. So I still look for factors. 3 and 9. 3/9 reduces to 1/3. So I multiply straight across and I get 7 over 3. That's already reduced. And check your positives and negatives. A negative times a negative is a positive. And then letter H is negative 1/5 times 10 over 3. I can cancel these two out and make this a 2, so my answer is negative 2/3. Letter I need to get a common denominator, so I put a 1 underneath here. My common denominator between 1 and 9 is a 9, so the numerator has to be a 45, because 9 times 5 is 45. Plus 2 9s is add the top, keep the bottom the same, and it does not reduce. And then down here, you're just applying the fractions. So I'm going to subtract 1/3 from each side. Now I have to get a common denominator. It's going to be 15. So multiply 5 by 15 by 3. 4 times 3 is 12. 1 times 5 is 5. So the numerator is negative 17 and the denominator is 15, and it does not reduce. when you have multiplication, so a number times x, you need to multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So this is check to see if you have common factors. No common factors. 4 and 5 don't cancel out, and 1 and 2 don't cancel out. So the answer is 5 ace. And then C, same thing. You're multiplying by letter A. On the side of the variable, you multiply both sides by the reciprocal. So you have 4 and a 7 doesn't reduce, but 6 and 3 reduces to a 2. So it's 4 times 2, which is 8 over 7. And then letter D, you're going to add 4/5 to each side. So it's 3 plus 4/5. Okay, you need to get a common denominator here. So put a 1 underneath here. So this is going to be a 5 as a common denominator. So multiply 3 times 5 to get 15. So 15/5 plus 4/5 is 19/5. And then letter E, you need to add 1/7 to each side. And now look at your common denominator. If you have a 28 and a 7, 28 is going to be your common denominator. 3 doesn't have to change, so it's 3/28 plus, but 1/7 is going to have to change to 4/28. So now when you add fractions, you add the top and keep the bottom the same. Now this one reduces to 1/4 because you can divide 7 by 7 and 28 by 7. And then letter F, write this as a mixed number. 3 times 15 is 15 plus 2 is negative 17/5 equals 3/5 x. Multiply both sides by the reciprocal. These two cancel out. So negative 17/3 equals x. And then the last few. So for letter G, to solve for x, I have to add 1/8 to each side. So I have to add negative 3/4 plus 1/8. My common denominator is going to be an 8, so I have to multiply negative 3 by 2, so it's negative 6. So negative 6 plus 1 is negative 5/8 equals x, and that does not reduce. And then letter H, I'm going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal because that's multiplying. Put a 1 underneath it. You can't cancel out a 2 and a 1. You can't cancel out a negative 2 and a 3. So the answer is negative 4/3 because you multiply across. And then the last one, I'm going to change to a mixed number or an improper fraction. So it's negative 9/2 x equals 1/3. Multiply this by negative 2/9, cancels out. Multiply this by negative 2/9. There's nothing I can cancel out, so it's negative 2 over 27 is the answer.